Hey, this is Meridith Elliott Powell, and you know what time it is. It's time for Thrive, the show where we dive into the strategies, discuss the steps, everything that you need to know to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. And I can't think of a better topic. Honestly, I'm so passionate about what we are going to talk about today. I have author, speaker, just leadership guru, Andrew Bryant with me today. And we're going to talk about self-leadership. And I think this is one of the most underserved topics probably in the market today. So this is one show you don't want to miss. Welcome, Andrew. We're going to talk in a moment. I want to start the video and get rolling on this conversation. All right, welcome back. We are not going to wait another moment. We are going to dive into the show. As I said, I've got the myth, the man, the legend with me today, Andrew Bryant. We first met in Singapore, I believe. Would that be correct?
That is, yes.
Yeah.
It was at a speakers convention in Singapore.
That's right. And Andrew is just a leadership expert, speaker, author. And his newest book and his newest topic is talking about self-leadership. So Andrew, I would just love for you to kick in, talk a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself to the audience. But really what I am fascinated with is, again, I think this is one of the most underserved topics out there today. And I don't know how you create leadership if a person doesn't want it themselves. So you take it from here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came up with the topic, why this is your area of expertise and focus.
Okay, so firstly, for your audience, I'm English by birth. I'm Australian by passport, which explains my accent. I'm Brazilian by wife, which explains my ability to consider multiple perspectives. I spent 17 years in Asia, and I now live in Portugal, and I work extensively in the United States. So go figure. The travel broadens the mind. And where I came to self-leadership was the realization of how framed we were in terms of perspective. And I've been actually writing and speaking about self-leadership since 1998. And actually the first book that I published on self-leadership, I published 4 actually, was in 2012. And you know, we don't choose the time, place of our birth. We don't choose our parents. Wherever I go in the world and I say, you know, are you proud? I mean, if I was in North America, I'd say, are you proud to be American? And Americans are really good on pride, right? I'm proud to be American. But for most people, that's an accident of birth, right? You're proud to be Irish because you were born in Ireland. You're proud to be Lithuanian because you were born in Lithuania. But because I've traveled so much, I realized that I could choose the cultural values that really sat with me. And when you travel, when you step out of the frame, you get to go, well, you know, how's that working for you, right? And it creates a much more challenging self-awareness. You have to go, well, why do I believe this? You know, why do I follow this football team? Well, it's because your parents did. You know, why do I vote, you know, left or right? Well, it's because my parents did. No, what do you believe? And that is a wake-up moment for many people. And I was inspired to start writing about that and, you know, how that impacts our lives. So that's how I started.
How do we, I feel like in today's marketplace, there's a real void of self-leadership. And the reason I say that is because when I started writing about employee engagement, and this was, you know, long before the Great Resignation, everybody was trying to create cultures of engagement. And I thought, why is this all driven top down? Like, where is my own responsibility in the fact that it's my life, it's my career, and if I want to be successful, don't I need to take a role in it? So how do you create, I guess I'm kind of fascinated by this idea of what you write about with creating a culture of self-leadership. What does it mean to lead yourself? And what does it mean to be in an environment that's creating that type of culture?
Okay. So let's define self-leadership. In 2012, with Dr. Anna Kazan, we wrote the book, Self-Leadership, How to Become a More Successful, Efficient, and Effective Leader from the Inside Out. And that inside out focus is very important. And in that book, we define self-leadership as a practice, the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. To my earlier point that we're framed is how intentional are we about our lives? Psychologists and sociologists these days are saying, well, you have no free will because you didn't choose your DNA, you didn't choose your upbringing. But the moment we become intentional, the moment we start to exercise agency over our lives, we do change the course of our life and can choose to become the version of ourselves that we want to be. So some people grow up with, well, you need to make your choices, right? If you read Richard Branson's autobiography, Losing My Virginity, you hear how as a young boy, his parents encouraged him to take risks. And not surprisingly, then he moved into being an entrepreneur. Whereas if your upbringing is, you follow the rules, do as you're told, don't think for yourself, then finding that level of autonomy and agency is a longer journey until such time as you're oppressed and you say, I've enough. I need to be the master of my own life, the captain of my own soul, and sort of paraphrasing Henley's dictum. So initially, it's the culture of you are responsible for yourself. You're accountable to the rules of the culture, right? Because culture is, as you know, it is the accumulation of rules and beliefs of a particular group of people. So in my latest book, which is the New Leadership Playbook, I have a model which defines ownership and then creates a distinction between responsibility for self and accountability to agreements or to other people or to objectives and outcomes. And where I think the problem that organizations have struggled with is defining ownership and the distinction. You're responsible for yourself. You're responsible to turn up to work in a fit state to contribute.
Okay.
And here's the sandbox in which we agree to play. These are the behaviors in our organization that we agree to play. The sandbox analogy is, when your kids are small, you say you can play in the sandbox, you can do whatever you want in the sandbox, but outside of the sandbox is dangerous, right? So having that conversation around what are the behaviors inside the sandbox that we want, it might be, speaking up, share your ideas, taking risk, or it might be, keep quiet, shut up, don't do anything, right?
Yeah.
That's that sandbox. Now, if you have high autonomy and you're in a culture that says, we don't value your ideas and we don't want you to take risks, you're going to go, this isn't the culture for me, and you're going to get out of it there. But if you want people to be creative, innovative, take ownership, then you've got to create that sandbox and be okay that they're going to try different things.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I wonder if that's a little bit where we got derailed. When the housing crisis happened in 2008, and then you back that up by COVID, understandably, I feel like my generation, which I'm the last year of the boomers, we held on a little too tight. And I do a lot of research around uncertainty, and the research has proven for us that that older millennials are the ones struggling and fear uncertainty the most. And I think it's because we haven't taught them how to lead through tough times. We haven't given it, because the only way you can learn to lead through a tough time is to take the reins and fail a little bit, right? And
Yep.
I think that's going to be a constant challenge. So, a couple of questions here. Let's start with, so I'm sitting in an organization, I'm listening to this podcast right now. Where do I go? How do I start to begin to create a culture of self-leadership?
Well, it always starts with you. You got to look in the mirror and say, am I practicing self-leadership? Am I taking ownership of my thoughts, feelings, and actions towards my objectives? Psychology 101 is, we're all maximizing the benefit to ourselves, right? We will all do what is best for us. Mm-hmm. But because we live in tribes or cultures or organizations or teams, we solve that algorithm between what's best for me and what's best for the group. Mm-hmm. So, asking yourself, am I speaking up, and saying, here are my needs, here are my wants, and here are my beliefs. And then inviting other people to say, well, here are my needs, here are my wants, and here's my beliefs. This is, the core of assertive communication, right? So if you are not yet able to voice your opinion or your perspective or your ideas or your feelings, what's stopping? Is this internal? Do you just have a belief I'm not allowed to do this? Or are there institutional practices that are dissuading people from having a voice, from speaking up?
Okay.
Let me just finish this
No,
out.
no, no. Great. Yeah.
I'm on a roll, Meredith. Let me.
Okay. Yeah.
I know it's a long soundbite, but my view on leadership is that leadership is a conversation. It's a conversation one-to-one and a conversation one-to-many. It's not didactic. Effective leadership is not didactic, and yet leaders are not good at having that backwards and forwards conversation, right? So being able to both say what you want and listen to the response is where we need to start. Sorry, I probably
no. I think that's great. I now want to ask the flip of that. My flip of that is I'm in an organization. The culture isn't like that, but I want to practice self-leadership. I want to be that leader that you're talking about in your book and in your work. Can I do that in an environment that doesn't support that?
So context is always important. I mean, self-leadership in North Korea is going to be very different from self-leadership in North Carolina.
I love having global guests. Exactly.
Look, I mean, I was very influenced by the book Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Viktor Frankl, who was he was a prisoner in a Nazi death camp. I mean, how much self-leadership can you have in that environment? And he said, the last of all human freedoms is the freedom to choose your own attitude regardless of circumstances.
Right.
So that's where we have to start. Our own attitude, our own viewpoint. That is the core of self-leadership. It is that level of autonomy regardless of the circumstances. But the moment we change our perspective, we change our environment. You and I have both coached individuals over the years, and the moment they change their perspective, the moment they change their outlook, the response that they get from their environment changes. Mm-hmm. It is a two-way thing. Yes, the environment influences how we behave, but we also are part of that culture. We are an active part. And as we change our intentionality, we change that which is around us. Now, for some organizations, that's a lot easier. Right. Look, if you're at the top of the organization, you're well educated, you're well positioned, you have a C-suite title, you've got a lot more clout than if you're not educated, you're at the bottom of the pile, and you don't have a background. So position helps, obviously, but we are all dealt this hand of cards, and we have to play the cards that we've got. Okay. And as unequal as that might be, the reality is you've got to play your cards, right? And you have to choose your ownership. Now, knowing when to speak up. I speak a lot on executive presence. In fact, I was writing a proposal just as we got on this call. And whilst executive presence is projecting confidence and gravitas and poise under pressure, it also is reading the room. And when we are self-aware, we increase our other awareness as well. So we get to know where's the point of leverage. When should I speak up? Where should I speak up? How should I speak up? That's important.
So what is the impact of a culture of self-leadership? I mean, where's the carrot for me as a leader? And how do I know, what are the impact signs? How do I know that what I'm trying to initiate is working?
Okay. We're both speakers. Give me permission to tell a quick story.
Yeah, no, I would love a quick story.
So I think this illustrates it, right? So during the pandemic, I was separated from my teenage kids. And my son and I could play online chess. My daughter, Tasha, didn't like chess, but her game of choice was Minecraft. I didn't play Minecraft, but I chose to enter into her world to maintain the relationship. Sure. So she taught me Minecraft. We're playing Minecraft, and she's really good at it, and I was rubbish. And I was on fire, but she had this amazing armor. And I said, hey, darling, could you help me enchant my armor like yours? And she looked at me through the camera and said, I could, but then you wouldn't learn anything. And I'm like, right there, my teenage daughter gets it. She's telling me that me, the adult, needs to take ownership of my own learning, my own action to get the results. She'd done it, all right? And if she did it for me, she would be actually enabling me to not do the hard work.
Right.
And it was just such a proud moment for me as a father because my teenage daughter got it.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in an organization where people are not taking ownership of things that they need to learn, if they're waiting for instruction, if things are getting missed because somebody goes, well, that's not my job, then you have the absence of self-leadership, which is blaming, complaining, and playing the victim. So what's the benefit? When people take ownership, they take responsibility, they take pride, they say, this is my organization, this is my team, I'm going to be solution focused. Well, those are the indicators. So
yeah, I would also imagine that when people are like that, their engagement levels are higher, your retention levels are higher. Would that be accurate?
It will be as long as you do make the change. I mean, as you and I know, if you do an engagement survey and people tell you what they think, and then you do nothing with that, then the level of cynicism goes through the roof, right? So, if the organization is making actions to give autonomy, and look, the pandemic gave everybody a lick of the ice cream in terms of what is it like to manage my own daily schedule, as opposed to have somebody leaning over my cubicle and tell me what to do. We saw women being able to manage their workday so that they could actually be mothers and still get the work done when the kids were sleeping, right?
Right.
So we've had a taste of that, and yet many organizations said, right, now you've got to go back into your cubicle, regardless of the fact that your team is in a different city.
Yeah.
So there's been a level of, it's a strong word, but there's been a level of stupidity around this. It's like we've tried it. We said it couldn't happen, it couldn't work, and then it did.
Yeah.
Now, I understand there are many activities where people have to be physically present, but not necessarily 9 to 5, 5 days a week.
Right.
And so trusting people, and that's the big leadership challenge now, is I'm not micromanaging this person. I have to tap into their narrative, their story, and what is it for them that's going to get the best out of them.
Right.
But when you do that, then you don't have to micromanage, and you're freed up to be more strategic and do better work.
So I'm interested in your global perspective. Do you feel like some countries do this better than others, or is this just a hit or miss wherever you are in the world?
Every country is a bell curve, right? So there are extroverts in Japan, right? So they exist. Yes, there are places where this works a lot better than others. The Nordic countries have led the way in terms of empowerment, engagement, equality, in many places, and yet they are still struggling. I remember last year, flying to Sweden with a very large manufacturing organization, and they were struggling with, well, how do we get people back to work? And I led a conversation with 100 of their leaders. Where do you need them back? Why do you need them back to work? Where do you need, what is the distinction between, what can they do virtually, online, hybrid, and where do you physically need them? And what is those benefits? Now, we know that if you're doing brainstorming with a group of leaders, you're actually better to be in the room. You can use virtual tools, they're great, but they're not as good as the chemistry of human beings working together.
Right.
So, engagement happens when I wrote at the back, I wrote the new leadership playbook in 2021 in the midst of the pandemic. And I said, look, coming out of this, we are going to need to reorganize work. We are going to need to get together, but, let's have an intentional offsite. Let's have intentional meetings. We're all getting together, not just to socialize and get drunk, but we're getting together because we have some brainstorming to do, we have some opinions to do, we have decisions to make, we have strategies to create. Let's get together for that intentionally.
Yeah.
And that's where I thought, people like you and I would be very busy facilitating those offsites or insight.
Right, exactly. Do you think that the blended workforce, when you wrote the playbook, is that what's here to stay? Is that are people fooling themselves? Are leaders fooling themselves if they think they can get people back to work full time?
It does, it is industry specific. If you're on a manufacturing production line, people physically have to be there. Mm-hmm. But we also have, AI, digitization is happening. The acceleration of that through the pandemic was huge. I think we have to really ask the question, what is it that the human being brings to the process? What is the humanity of our organization? The subtitle of the New Leadership Playbook is being human whilst delivering accelerated results.
Okay.
We have to do both, right? Let's face it. If we do not deliver results as an organization, or as a manager, as a leader, our tenure is going to be limited. But if you can't engage the people, to your research, our tenure is also going to be limited. So we have these two things. We have to engage, develop the people, the culture, and deliver results. You can't only focus on one. So it is asking the question, where do we bring the humanity, right? I mean, if AI can do the job, if ChatGPT is going to do the job, we're going to lay everybody off, right? So industries are being disrupted. But my point and the work I've been doing with organizations is, but what is distinctly human? And we can I can read a blog post and go, well, AI wrote that. I have a reaction to YouTube videos that are AI generated with an artificial voice these days. Seriously, get on. If we replace this, the chemistry between you and I with an AI, it's not going to be there. And so that chemistry, the iron sharpens iron of human discussion, that's what we've got to focus on. And really raise the level of human employment to, let's get people to engage their passion, their purpose to the process, and let's see if we can automate all the boring stuff back out of that.
Yeah. Such a great topic. And I feel like we have just scratched the surface, but we are at the end of this podcast. And I always like to end with 2 questions. Andrew, I want you to tell the audience the easy one, how they find you, how they get a hold of you, how they can find out more about your book. And we'll put all that in the show notes. The second is, what is your greatest piece of advice for leaders out there challenged in this uncertain marketplace, or individuals out there in this uncertain marketplace? What is your greatest piece of advice for how they can turn all of this uncertainty into their greatest competitive advantage?
So the first is easy, selfleadership.com. Go there. There's links to my books. There's link to a free assessment. How much self-leadership are you actually practicing? So all of that on selfleadership.com. The greatest piece of advice is something I've been saying for over 20 years, is just buy yourself a mirror. Look in the mirror and go, am I becoming the person that I need to be to achieve what I want to achieve? So that assumes that we know where we want to go. So if we're being challenged by uncertainty and you say, well, I want everything certain. And you go, well, who would I have to be to have everything certain? And you might not like that person, and then that changes your objective. If you say, I want to be the leader that engages and empowers my people to contribute their best passion and purpose and talent, then who do I need to be to lead those people? Put the ownership on self, because you can change you much faster than you can change other people.
So well said. I mean, the work is always internal. And I've always said that, and I'd be interested to see if you agree. I mean, people watch your actions far more than watch your words. If you're a leader not doing what you're asking the people around you to do, it's like smoking a cigarette and telling your children not to smoke. It's just never going to happen, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. 100%.
Well, Andrew, you have been an amazing guest, as always, and we'd love to have you back here on Thrive to talk more about this topic, which I think is going to become more and more relevant in today's marketplace, because it is becoming more and more void in today's marketplace. So thank you to you. We'll wrap all up this, put it in a podcast, promote your book out there. And thank you to our audience. We'll see you right back here next week for another episode of Thrive, and how we can work together to turn all of this uncertainty into our greatest competitive advantage. We'll see you next week.